20-minute rotation for today to the Conservatives, which will take us right up until about the time we quit.
Okay. Good afternoon, Minister. Minister, I couldn't help but notice you actually issued a press release last week, November 6th. Bit of back patting, of course, and there's on occasion that's okay. You were opening up actually 2 new roundabouts on Highway 7 in Perth to improve traffic and safety conditions for local families, businesses, and visitors. So first off, I'm awfully glad to see that you're supporting building more roundabouts in Ontario. But of course, I can't help but see the irony with this situation. You know, you clearly support including roundabouts in Ontario's infrastructure, yet you don't support including specific rules for these intersections in Ontario's laws. So I guess on behalf of folks, the Joes in Waterloo Region, I'm just trying to help clarify how that position makes any sense, you know, with regards to building new roundabouts, but yet not providing those rules in Ontario's Highway Traffic Act.
So I would be glad to get the people from the ministry up, but I'm a little at a loss to understand exactly what you're asking for. Roundabouts have been part of Ontario. They exist in many other jurisdictions. There are regulations and highway rules that govern these and other intersections, and there's specific things in the driver's manual that deal with roundabouts, and this is well regulated and well covered. I have talked to municipal leaders, I've talked to the OPP, I've talked to all kinds of folks. I cannot find anyone who thinks that there is a specific need for more specific legislation or regulation. As a Conservative, I thought you might be a little opposed to government solving everything by a whole bunch of new rules to tell people how to live their lives. But if you have some specific ideas, or you can give me an example of a jurisdiction that has greater or more detailed regulation or rules, I would happily look at that. I've said that several times in several places to several media outlets, and as of November 19th today, I have yet to receive from anybody in Ontario or anywhere a list of suggestions or a proposal for some new regulations. And I haven't been able to find any where that are significantly different than we do. So this to me is a little bit of a red herring, but if you can point me to some regulations or rules or a standard that you think is appropriate, we will gladly consider it and look at putting it into legislation. But no one's produced that yet.
All right. Well, Minister, I know you read, and the Waterloo Region Record is out daily, and you know what? In a recent issue where it referenced Waterloo Region Chair Ken Sealing, I know you know him, the Waterloo Region Police, the CAA, and several other local politicians support creating clear, uniform rules for roundabouts in the Highway Traffic Act. Are you suggesting that these people are actually wrong?
So I will ask them, and Ken Sealing's a friend, and think highly of him, what kind of regulations, what is missing in the Highway Traffic Act, what would you like to add, and where is there a lack of clarity? Because the debate is whether or not the existing rules are sufficient. You have said, and there's a very passionate columnist in the Waterloo Record who writes about this more than almost any other subject, who feels very strongly about this, but you want to offer up some rules or some regulations or point out where there's inadequacy. We have roundabouts being put in by regional governments, municipalities in the province, everywhere across Ontario and all across Canada, and the only concerns being raised in Kitchener, and I've said to people in the Waterloo region, since I haven't got a complaint from a single other municipality or jurisdiction, if you want to introduce some special rules or regulations as a municipality, you can do all kinds of things. You have control of sidewalks, public rights of way, and things like that within municipal jurisdiction. Happy to do it. But please find someone else in Ontario who thinks this is an issue, or give me some regulations or some things that you think should be in there to be clear, and no one has produced that
yet. Well, you mentioned the fact that...
my deputy is happy to address that as well.
I just want to reference back on actually March 30th, there was a news article published in the Waterloo Region Record, and you said that my concern about ensuring safety at roundabouts, it wasn't a real issue. And so I want to quote that to you. You said, "It doesn't surprise me that my dear friend," and I appreciate that comment, "Michael Harris is asking questions and going on about these things. It's a little demonstration about how disconnected he is from the real issues in this community." Would you agree with that statement? No. Do you still stand by those words?
I haven't read the article, and I don't know what the source of the quote is, but what I did say at the time, and I was very clear, is the priority right now in the Kitchener-Waterloo area for this government is completing Highway 7 and getting regular GO service and completing the LRT. I have those when I ask people locally that those are the priorities. And since we just doubled the GO service, and our federal cousins in your party cut 2 trains to basically negate the improvements, those are the kinds of fights that I think people in Waterloo region are telling me.
Well, you did promise 4,
and I said, and it was. No one to this point has been able to produce a set of rules or regulations or give me an example of a set of rules or regulations in another jurisdiction that they think are better than what we have.
So you're really saying...
And I said, I think it's a little disconnected from reality given that no one else has done that. If you had done that, I would have not made that comment. So And if you talk to the member from Barrie, you'll find out that I am most accommodating when people are reasonable and not overly political. And I will make a very sincere commitment to you today. Produce some regulations or rules that you think are more reasonable or more responsible, or give me an illustration where someone is doing this better than Ontario, and I will take that seriously.
But Minister,
it's hard for me to take it seriously. It's hard for me to take it seriously when neither you or anyone else has produced those set of rules or regulations or been able to give me an example of how it could be better.
Yeah, but Minister, that's your job, to create the regulations. You're the minister.
So can I...
Don't you not take roundabout safety?
My deputy wants to get in on this, so I don't want to stand in her way.
Too? I have to admit, and I know...
I want to just have him answer that question, though. Do you not believe that... Do you not believe or agree with me that roundabout safety is a major issue in the region of Waterloo?
I think the need to have safe intersections, including roundabouts, is a very real issue in Waterloo and across Ontario.
So then why don't you make regulations?
And I don't believe in simply manufacturing red tape regulations for the sake of somebody's populist agenda. I've said to you, and you've raised the issue, the onus is on you. There isn't anyone in the ministry that I can find that's actually identified this as a real serious concern. You've said it's a serious concern. I accept your word on this. So then I've asked you what the logical question back is from the minister, which I ask everybody, which is, what is your proposed solution to this or that?
I just don't see, Minister, how you can say that pedestrian
Anyway, my
safety...
deputy really wants to get her oar in the water here, and I think just out of courtesy we should let her.
I find it, and I think the folks in my region will find it difficult hearing the transportation minister saying that pedestrian safety is ensuring pedestrian safety at roundabouts is red tape. I find that difficult. I find
so if you want to have an honest discourse, I said pedestrian intersections, whether they're roundabouts or other time, is absolutely a huge #1 priority. I also said to you that you've raised a concern that there is something peculiar or unusual about roundabouts in Waterloo region that requires additional rules. You have failed to actually identify what those rules would be or identify a jurisdiction that has rules different than ours. When you do that, I will more than accommodate it, but you failed to do that. And again, I'm going to ask you, can we let the deputy get her oar in the water here to answer your question, since this is an area she has some expertise in?
Quickly, and then I'll come back to...
So, okay, my parents are in Kitchener-Waterloo, and I know how much they talk about the roundabouts in your area.
You should take Glen with you someday, then.
What's that?
You should take Glen for a ride someday up the Kitchener-Waterloo.
Roundabouts, as a jurisdiction,
drive.
As a jurisdiction, Ontario is fairly late getting to the world of roundabouts. Since I think 2009, I think we've built about 7 on our provincial highways, and there's another 40 or 50 of them in planning. And of course, we know that a lot of municipalities have really embraced them. I've got one right in my neighbourhood in Toronto, and I certainly appreciate the good number of them that are in the Kitchener-Waterloo area. I guess the point that I'd say there is that it is a shared responsibility. All the rules of the Highway Traffic Act that apply to driving at an intersection also apply on a roundabout, whether it is following too closely, yielding to pedestrians, properly signaling. All of those rules apply. The other point I want to make, though, is that in the driver's manual, the handbook that we give out, certainly to all of our young folks and new people who want to drive, there is a specific section on roundabouts as well to actually guide people on that, because you do have to take care. I guess the other point that I'd make, when I first became deputy of the ministry and I started to learn more about the roundabouts, is I do appreciate, though, the safety that you have in roundabouts when it comes to vehicle traffic. When it comes to an intersection, and if you do have a collision, it's going to be a very different scenario than if you have a roundabout and you have a collision, which could just be the side swiping of a car. So I guess the point there being, the Highway Traffic Act, all those rules do apply. We need people to be educated, and that's the critical thing there. And we do that through the different different products that we produce, as well as the driving schools. If you Google roundabouts, you'll find a lot of great YouTube videos.
Yeah, no, and I know our region has done a good job on
Yes,
educating
and many others.
motorists. There's clearly more to do, but I want to bring you back when you referenced the Highway Traffic Act. And I received a letter from you, Minister, back in June after I've wrote you now and your predecessor on the same issue. You actually admitted that the Highway Traffic Act, quote, does not specifically state the responsibility of pedestrians and drivers at uncontrolled crossings found at roundabouts. And I also want to reference also from the Kitchener-Waterloo, an editorial, in fact, from the Kitchener-Waterloo Record just recently. It also, too, called on Ontario needing a roundabout law. As it stands, the Highway Traffic Act, the most important law governing motorists, says nothing about roundabouts. One of the gaps in provincial law became glaringly apparent during a recent trial of a Grand River Transit driver who hit a student at a Kitchener roundabout in 2011 in my riding. Local roundabouts are posted with signs that tell drivers to yield to pedestrians. But because Ontario traffic legislation is silent about roundabouts, drivers are not required by law to give way to pedestrians in roundabouts. Were you aware of that?
I am aware of that, and actually I think I'm also aware of that unfortunate accident. I guess the point that I'd make there is that a roundabout is just another form of an intersection in a sense. And so the Highway Traffic Act applies regardless. It should not be seen as, if you don't have a very expressed reference in the Highway Traffic Act, it doesn't mean that you don't use good common sense and understand how to drive a vehicle when you're in that roundabout.
So I guess, first off, I drive through roundabouts. I have a family I sponsor a lot, and two of my best friends and my partner's best friends, so I'm out there all the time.
Do you signal when you go in a roundabout?
Of course I do. And when I get into the intersection of a roundabout, you yield to pedestrians. In my community, I have five-way corners, I have off-centered intersections, I have all kinds of confusing corners, and we have a set of rules. We don't have a set of rules that apply. The same standard applies. When you come to an intersection, you yield to a pedestrian. Every driver does that. And if someone was driving a truck that was a member of the Ontario Trucking Association, or a bus, they are not only trained in the manual, they are well trained in that. And find me bus drivers that don't know that, and I will be...
Can we get a photo or a picture, a map of this famous roundabout? Because I want to know, it would help.
Your point of order is not well taken,
No?
but
Traffic
you can
circle.
ask for it tomorrow when it's your turn.
I'm
That's
gonna
not
ask
a
for
point
it
of
tomorrow.
order.
Yes.
So
So the rules are very clear because they apply to all intersections. The same rules apply in a roundabout that apply in other intersections. They are not difficult. They exist in almost every country, and they're in on that. We do not prescribe differently.
Now, I want to go
So
back.
what would you imagine we would put in the Highway Act? At roundabouts, the same rules apply as at a four-way intersection or a five-way intersection? Just give me the language you want, and I'm happy to write it in. But I'll tell you. But seriously,
I
it's
tabled
been
a private member's bill, Minister.
But I find it disingenuous.
No.
When I say to you, I have no issue with the concern you're raising and accept that this is a matter of concern. And I say to you, I don't think the problem is more regulation because the rule is simple and clear. And traffic experts, and I've talked to lots of folks, CAA and others, say don't have multiple rules because people don't follow them. Have one clear rule, which is an intersection. You have to come to a stop if there's a pedestrian and yield to the pedestrian. And every safety expert I talk to tells me that clarity and simplicity of that rule is paramountly important, and creating different rules for different intersections would create complexity and problems.
Well, you know what,
so
Minister,
I ask you sincerely, if this isn't politics and you're really concerned about public safety and accept that you are, then please find me a jurisdiction that has a regulation substantially different than Ontario's anywhere in the world and show me what the writing is. You failed to do that over a year.
No.
You've dined out on my reputation, which I take deep offense to.
Minister,
And you can't give me today in front of your colleagues a straight answer to a straight question.
So
quite frankly, sir, would you please show me a single regulation different than our own, better than our own, panel of safety expert who's giving different advice than I'm getting, because with all due respect, I defer to the experts in this, not a colleague of mine in the legislature who can't produce a single bit of evidence to support his position or an alternative rule.
All right, well, I let you talk, so I'm going to go. Minister, you came to my community in Kitchener-Waterloo and said I had my head in the sand, that roundabout safety wasn't a real issue in my community. Well, I'll tell you, it darn well is. There was a girl that almost lost her life crossing a roundabout. And even in your own letter, Minister, you said that it does not specifically state the responsibility of pedestrians and drivers at uncontrolled crossings found at a roundabout. So it's your law that you need to fix. You are the minister. Minister, I tabled a private member's bill in this legislature, the Safe Roundabout Act. I'm not being prescriptive. I said consult with the experts, including the police in my region, who support my call for clarity on roundabouts in Ontario here. The CAA, the member agency you just referenced, also support my bill. I'm asking you, consult with the experts, create clarity in the Highway Traffic Act to create rules on roundabout use. People are going to get killed here because there's not the clarity. You said this isn't an issue. It darn well is an issue.
Okay. So I will consult again. I have. And I want to tell you a little story about some of the things you learn when you're old like me. It's what I call the problem with crosswalks. And any of us who've been in municipal government maybe have experienced this. A young child gets killed on a busy street. The city council, against the advice of the police and all the experts, says, well, the solution is we'll put a crosswalk here or an elderly person. And all the evidence is that you shouldn't put a crosswalk there. But it's like a placebo. The city councillor, the mayor, everyone says, well, little Jane got killed and this is terrible, so there's under political pressure. How can you look the parents in the eye and not put a crosswalk there? Well, I've seen that happen before. And then I've seen other people get killed and hit and injured in that crosswalk because it wasn't evidence-based. So I went and talked to people. So everyone thinks that we should do more awareness, more education about this, and the regional Waterloo is doing that. But I really want to go back to the deputy and the ADM. Show me what that rule is. I can't find anyone, Mike, with the greatest sincerity and respect that is actually proposing something different than what's already in law. I think there's other things we can do to do that. And to say that I'm not concerned about safety, I've said it over and over. It's not my issue here. My issue is simply what is the rule. Now, I'll turn it back over. But give my deputy a chance because they've been dealing with this issue for years before I came along.
So are you telling me the CAA, the Waterloo Region Police, you know what, these parties all support a roundabout law in Ontario? Are you saying that they are wrong?
Okay, so tell me what the roundabout law looks like.
Well, I'm asking you. You're the minister. You've got the experts. Consult with them.
The experts are
add clarity to the Highway Traffic Act to include roundabouts. I've also proposed a solution that would include testing on roundabouts for G2 and G exit road.
I'm going to ask a question here. ADM Chaput, you're one of our experts. Yeah. Maybe you can talk a little bit about this issue, the design issues and that, because
let's find some middle ground. Support the Safe Roundabouts Act. It's there. Consult, create some clarity.
I have consulted, and I will go back and meet with the Waterloo.
They support this. Let's work together on this, Glen. I'm happy to sit down and work with you.
They support it. That's great. If you can describe to me what it is they support, what are the changes they would like to make or you would like to make, I've said very sincerely, I will take it seriously. I can turn over to ADM Chaput because I think you and I are going around in circles here.
We're going to go for coffee. We're going to go for coffee.
So if I could just add a few points. I think the deputy raised it as well. Certainly the instructions in the driver's handbook are a good start in terms of educating the public on how they should manage and drive through a roundabout. The legislation does include, as we mentioned before, and the roundabout is designed to include one-way signs, yield signs, stop bars, etc. for the driver, so they have an understanding of how to treat the intersection similar to others. I think the biggest issue here is that there's a shared responsibility between the pedestrian and the driver. The pedestrian should be looking both ways before they cross the street. The driver should be attentive to the pedestrian that's standing on the sidewalk or waiting to enter the intersection. I think clearly drivers have to yield to pedestrians when they're on the roadway, and our legislation says that. And clearly, pedestrians need to wait for a safe opportunity to enter the intersection. They need to get that eye contact with the driver. We want to make sure that pedestrians cross where it's safe. And we teach our children that. And that's one of the laws that we learned as a young child and as we grow up with Elmer the safety elephant. But the important aspect, too, in terms of a design perspective, the roundabouts are designed with islands so that, or a properly designed roundabout is designed with islands. It's designed with traffic features that slow the driver down considerably before even entering the roundabout. The pedestrian has a chance to make that eye contact. There's splitter islands so that the pedestrian doesn't have to cross all the lanes at the same time. They usually have a splitter island that allows them to stop in the middle. Again, watch the traffic approaching in the roundabout to wait for a safe opportunity to cross.
So I'm going to get this on because I know we've got about seconds left. What I want to ensure is that the Highway Traffic Act states who yields to who when the pedestrian is on the curb at a roundabout. That is what we're looking for, clarity in the Act. It needs to be there, because it's the yielding with pedestrians that's unclear right now in the Act itself. And you can only look to the court case recently for the confusion pertaining to that.
Okay, so now we're making progress. All right, so I agree with you on that. My understanding is that there is clarity, and I can tell you as a driver that was always clear because it's
roundabouts isn't in the Act.
Okay, so that it is a universal law. And the argument against specifying in law is that it then starts to create exceptions legally.
So the final question of the day. Will you work with me on this?
Absolutely.
Okay,
yes.
That's the final question because the time is up on that. It is now 1 minute to 6. I'm going to use the chair's prerogative to say that we are finished for the day. We are back tomorrow to continue and to complete this particular ministry. Given the time that is left, for tomorrow, which is approximately 2 hours and 15 minutes if we start at 3:45, and given the fact that we still have 2 hours left of questioning, I have taken the decision as the chair to tell the Ministry of Aboriginal Affairs not to come because there will literally only be about 5 minutes after we deal with the questions, after we deal with the estimates and the votes, and after we have 2 important motions that are before us. So just so people will know, the Ministry of Aboriginal Affairs will not be called. Okay? Everybody understands that? All right, it now being 6 o'clock, we are adjourned and back tomorrow at 3:45.
Mm-hmm.